Welcome into Believe in Kentucky on the Believe Podcast Network, alongside Cole Park for the Cat's Paws. My name is Vinny Hardy, coming to y'all courtesy of the Believe Podcast Network, as mentioned. Everywhere you listen, everywhere you can watch on our YouTube channel. Feel free to like, subscribe, rate, review, give us those 5 stars. Like I said, like we always say, Louisville, Tennessee fans have done so. So as fans, jump in there and give us a little 5-star rating. Helps us grow, helps us be easier to find, and across all the platforms, we would definitely appreciate it. CP, man, we let them boys off the hook Saturday. Uh, I'm gonna pat myself on the back for the 23 points. I did say Kentucky would get 23. We didn't get the scoop and score or the pick six, but it wasn't for lack of effort from Ty Bryant because he manufactured 2 turnovers by himself. But the Cats unfortunately could not hold on to that early 10-point lead and fell by 1 score again to the Ole Miss Rebels.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cutter Boley said it best today at practice. He said that's a game we should have won. We could have won. They had multiple game-tying opportunities there, back-to-back drives where you could have tied the game, and you turn it over on downs twice in a row. And even from the very beginning, it feels like this team just kind of shot itself in the foot over and over again. We've kind of talked maybe not on this show, but ad nauseum over the week about the offensive communication issues, the substitutions, the wasting all 3 of your timeouts in the first half, all of that stuff. We've talked a lot about it with the players, the coaches, it's stuff that needs to be sorted out. But even as early on as the beginning of the game, you get those back-to-back interceptions by Ty Bryant. The first time you are able to capitalize, get in the end zone. The second time you settle for a field goal when you should be up 14-0, you're up 10-0. Obviously, Ole Miss comes back, takes the lead. You still tie it at 20, and then you kind of just lose it there and settle for a consolation field goal to cover the spread in the end. And it was a disappointing one for sure.
Yeah. So 10 points off of turnovers, 23 points, or 13 the rest of the way. What was the the press box etiquette? Supposed to say anything, but the vibe, were they murmuring when the timeout debacles were happening and the disorganization was happening? Was there things being muttered under everyone's breath? I mean, that happens from time to time up there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I think the first time it happens, you're like, that's frustrating. And then the second time you're like, if they just do it again. By the third time, it was like, come on, guys, like, what are we doing here? I think, I heard someone say like, well, there goes all of their timeouts. They don't have any now. And obviously, we saw how that first half ended. They could have used one with that interesting attempt to score before the half, we'll say. And I think it was funny because, when you're up in the press box, you're writing, you're working, you're covering the game. And it's easy to let a few things slip through the cracks, things that, you're paying so much attention that certain things almost slip by you. Like you just kind of accept like, okay, yeah, that's what happened. Like, I'm not going to question it. I think someone on our message board on the Cat's Paws was like, yeah, so why are we making a substitution after a 2-minute timeout? Why did we not know what we were going to be doing after a full 2-minute timeout? Like what's going on here? And, it's stuff like that. Like I didn't even process that when it happened. You're just like, they burned a timeout. And then, you think about it, you're like, yeah, why did Kentucky need to make those substitutions after the 2-minute timeout? And then, Stoops would later go on to admit on Monday that he wanted to go for it. But then you have the timeout they burn instead of taking a delay of game before punting the football. It's kind of like, why are we using a timeout before we're punting it? And like I said, Stoops would later admit that, he wanted to go for it. It just didn't work out that way. So he ended up punting it. He admitted that he said, I should have just taken the penalty and then punted it, oh well. But when you're watching the game, it just looks so disorganized. And obviously we saw the ABC broadcasters kind of tearing Kentucky apart during that game. And quite frankly, there's different reasons for different things. Kentucky's coaches and players will be the first ones to tell you that they have a lot they need to work on. But I didn't think anything he said on that broadcast was unfair watching the game being played.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's it's like you said, the whole world's watching that 3:30 game. It's ACC game. The only 2 SEC teams playing against each other. don't know about you, but despite of all that, upset and refusal, but seems to be still optimistic. I'm still like right next to see the same juxtaposition that I'm seeing about him. Still positive, still upbeat. Maybe even more so than I thought he would be after losing that game. I don't know if you see it that way or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is interesting. Obviously everyone was very, very frustrated after that loss. The players were frustrated. Coach Stoops was frustrated. He said a few things after. He's like, I'm kind of mad. I'm upset at how this went. And the coordinators were frustrated. But at the same time, I think that they also have the ability to step back and say, hey, if we're being honest with ourselves, we played messy, sloppy, ugly football, and we lost by 1 point against a team who some people have as like a playoff team. This is a team that should theoretically go into the college football playoffs if they do what they're supposed to do. And you play a terrible offensive game with really, really poor, communication issues, decision making, wasting your timeouts. You had to throw in your redshirt freshman quarterback there because your starting quarterback gets injured. And you lose by 7 points. There's a lot of promise there. It's something that Bush Hamdan said today. I don't have the exact quote up right in front of me, but he basically said, we're just 1 or 2 things away from being a really damn good football team. He's like, we still believe, we have 40 guys who believe that. We believe that. We believe we can be a great football team and a very good offensive football team too. These are things that, obviously there's a lot of frustrations, things they need to clean up, things they need to fix. But he's like, there's also a lot of good things we saw. And I think that, especially when you're a sports fan, it's easy to be kind of jaded. And, you see this and, you remember last year, it's so easy to just think of, it's going to spiral, it's going to snowball, they're not going to win a single SEC game. But, Ole Miss theoretically might be one of the better teams in the SEC if they play the way they're supposed to. They have a absolutely elite offense. That's something Mark Stoops even admitted after the game. He said, I think they're going to put up a whole lot more than 30 points against a whole lot of teams this season, and even teams in our league this season. So I think that you're frustrated, you're disappointed because you feel like you should have won that game, but then you kind of step back and you're like, we should have won that game against a team that most people have in the college football playoffs. So what does that say about Kentucky? What does that say about our ability to kind of move forward and, play in some of those games? And, there's a lot of teams who have looked a lot shakier this season per se. And South Carolina's looked not perfect. Texas has looked not perfect. A lot of teams in this conference have shown a bit of weaknesses here and there. And I'm not saying Kentucky's going to beat Texas. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying they haven't played perfectly. It's not illogical to have some optimism after the Ole Miss game, saying, hey, Kentucky lost in frustrating fashion. Kentucky shot itself in the foot. But Kentucky beat itself as opposed to really being beaten by Ole Miss. So if that's the case, if you can clean up some of those mistakes, who's to say you can't go and do that again and win a game against a team the caliber of Ole Miss?
Bush said that they should have put up 30, and maybe it is wallowing in the frustration. And if I feel that way, I hope I'm wrong. I always hope I'm wrong if I'm, frustrated or feeling a little negative or whatever. But the 6 inches from perfection, that hit me like 2 plays from 9-3. I'm like, look, man, it's a game of inches. If we're that close, details. You can't spell detail without an I and a T. Dot your I's, cross your T's. Just
That's something that Stoops said too. When he said it feels like we're 6 inches away, he said, but those 6 inches matter, and they do. Every single play is the difference between winning and losing a game, and you can only do that so many times. Yeah, sure, you could be 0-12 and almost have won every game, but you look up and you're 0-12. So who cares?
Shoulda, coulda, woulda, man.
At some point, I'm with you on that. Like, I agree, Kentucky was. They're so close, and if they can get it going, then it could be really good. It could be really great. You're a one-loss team. It's early in the season. There's a lot of football left to play. But at the same time, we saw last year how close they were against Georgia, how they did beat Ole Miss, and what ended up becoming of that? Nothing. They went 4-8. So, it only gets you so far being so close, and now it's time to get there, cross that line. And that's something that, Bush was really emphasizing today is at this point, we're going out there to just try to play our football. We're going to try to play our best football. We need to cross that line and we need to move forward. We can't be right on the cusp anymore. We have to be there now.
So you have probably on paper, your worst non-conference opponent, of the four coming in this weekend. Huh?
Tennessee.
Oh, yeah, Tennessee Tech would like to say hold our beer.
Yes, non-conference opponent.
Tennessee Tech enters the chat. I stand corrected. But you have Eastern Michigan. Then you have a bye before you go and play the team that destroyed you up here last year and kind of sent you on this spiral, outside of the win against Ole Miss that sent your season spiraling out of control. So we know the narrative about Stoops coming out of bye weeks, but you get an extra week to focus on Shane Beamer and his sunglasses, and we know you don't like that dude, and he gets on your nerves, and he's goofy, and he's so, like you said, can you clean it up? Can you not beat yourself? Take out all your frustration, iron out all the mistakes against Eastern Michigan, play some second and third string guys and get some depth, some game reps, get healthy, get an extra week, go to Columbia, and let's see. Show us something.
I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say, I've said this on the record before. I don't care to go out and say it. I think South Carolina is one of the most winnable games in this schedule. I don't care about that little number 10 next to their name last week or number 11 now, I think. I don't care. I really don't. AP, we've seen we've seen what social media is talking about with the AP poll right now and some questionable votes being thrown certain directions. At the end of the day, it's a bunch of people just voting on games that some of them might not have even watched all of. So I don't really care what the AP poll says. I don't think South Carolina is a top 15 team in this country. Maybe I'm giving them bulletin board material. Hope I'm not. They're probably not going to see this, I hope. No offense to our show. I want us to get as many viewers as possible, but I also don't want South Carolina to see me saying I don't think they're a top 15 team. But I think they've looked shaky. They got what looked like a pretty good win over Virginia Tech to start the season, a very important one for Shane Beamer, the Beamer Ball legacy in Blacksburg. But then Virginia Tech comes out and just absolutely blows it against Vanderbilt, ends up getting kind of blown out by Vanderbilt after leading them for most of that game. So that win looks a little shakier. And then South Carolina, I know there was weather issues. I know it ended up going super late into the night, but they don't look as convincing as you want them to against FCS South Carolina State. And I think that, one, for whatever reason, Kentucky can be really competitive in Columbia, even with the tough atmosphere. They've shown it before. They've won games in Columbia with that brutal atmosphere. And two, I know the narrative about Stoops coming out of a bye week, but you get this game to get right. I'm not saying you can overlook Eastern Michigan. You need to still play your best football, but, you have a chance to get right, and then you have the bye week. You can get Calzada healed up a little bit more. You can see what you want to see between him and Boley this weekend. Hopefully you can get DJ Waller back and your defensive backs, but even if you can't, I'm sure we'll get to see, Kevis Thomas a little bit more this weekend. We only saw him very sparingly against Ole Miss. We saw most of the reps on the DBs come from JQ and Tarian, but it'll get him some reps this weekend, hopefully see what he can do, get him more confident. And then you go into Columbia, and again, for whatever reason, honestly, if we're looking at the last few years, Kentucky's kind of played pretty well on the road in the SEC and has played better on the road than it has at home. So we'll see how that goes. But I know the bye week narrative. I know South Carolina is a good football team. They're a strong football team. Maybe Beamer's had your number a little bit lately. Maybe he blew you out at home, punched you in the mouth last season. That's where a lot of this spiral started. I would disagree with that. I would say the spiral really started with Vanderbilt because you were so close against Georgia. You blow out Ohio, and then you win at Ole Miss. So clearly you weren't beaten down by that time. But I think it's winnable. I think if Kentucky can go into South Carolina and win that game, that changes a lot of the narrative around this season. That changes the way a lot of people feel about this team. That changes a lot. Obviously you have to win convincingly against Eastern Michigan this weekend. I feel like that's a bit of a given. You need to win that game by a lot. Maybe even try to cover that 23.5 point spread that's out there right now, if you can get the offense to do it. But You win that game, you get the bye week to get yourself right. You go into South Carolina. If you win that game, we're talking about a completely different season. The same way we would be talking very differently if they had done what they were supposed to do and beaten Ole Miss. There's a whole new ceiling for what people think about Kentucky football. And I think that needs to happen. And I think if you come out of that bye week and you kind of lay an egg at South Carolina, then we're talking about a whole nother situation where you've got that brutal SEC slog coming up and you're like, oh boy, like, I don't know. But I think that game at South Carolina is one of the most important on the schedule right now.
Who will be under center? Will Zach be healed up? Will it be Cutter's first road start of his career? What are we gonna have when we get to September 27th?
It's a good question. I mean, it's hard to say for sure until we see this weekend. The implication I got from Bush this weekend, or from today, is, Zach is healthy. He's practicing right now. Whether he's 100% or not, I doubt it. But he sat out of practice on Monday, practicing again today. Still, they're mixing Boley into some of those first team reps. We'll see how they both play on Saturday. How comfortable is Calzada even against Eastern Michigan? How is his arm looking? How confident is he? Is he able to kind of clean up some of those mistakes? Is there a better connection with some of those wide receivers in those plays? Is he stepping up into the pocket and not, drifting out and backpedaling as much as we've seen him be doing? And then with Cutter, is he hitting those receivers when they're open? That's something he admitted today. He said, I missed K-Law over the middle, wide open. He's like, I wish I could have that one back. I've got to make those throws. But is he going to be hitting those receivers? Is he going to be dropping those shoulders? We know Mark Stoops wasn't very pleased at him dropping that shoulder. He said, I don't need two hurt quarterbacks. Yeah. So I think this Saturday is going to tell us a lot. If Cutter Boley plays really, really well, it wouldn't shock me if Cutter Boley is under center. If Zach Calzada comes out and plays really, really well, Cutter Boley still shows some of that, some of that greenness he's got on him. Wouldn't shock me with Zach Calzada. Wouldn't even shock me if you get into the South Carolina week and it's another, we'll play both of them. Who knows? I think that this weekend's going to tell us a lot, but until we see that game this weekend, it's going to be pretty impossible to say who's going to be under center for sure, because it's going to entirely depend on how both Calzada and Boley play on Saturday, assuming they both still do. Again, you never know when you're healing from an injury. It's not always linear. So hopefully everything's okay there with Zach's arm going through practice this week. Hopefully he's able to, kind of feel more comfortable doing that with that shoulder. So if we see both of them this weekend, I think this weekend will tell us a lot about who's going to play there. And then obviously, we'll see what they see in the bye week. But I could see any combination of it being Cutter, Zach, or a combination of both in Columbia.
Bo Allen getting in Saturday.
No. Saying no. He practiced with the twos yesterday, obviously, with Zach being out on Monday. Bo Allen was with the twos on Monday. With Zach being back, I don't imagine he was playing much first or second team reps. If you want my honest opinion, I do not expect to see Bo Allen Saturday. Just being blunt about it. I don't. Could I? Maybe. Anything could happen. I'm eager and happy to be surprised, but I don't expect to see Bo Allen on our field on Saturday.
Fair enough. And, you at South Carolina, then at Georgia, who is one of those little shakier than we thought looking type teams. We'll should learn a lot about them when they come to Knoxville and play Tennessee Saturday. Florida, and they had the wake up call. We saw South Florida. They put it on Boise State. That should have, if you were overlooking them, that should have refocused your attention. And they still come into the swamp and get you. And now you got LSU next for Billy Napier and the boys. And they did this last year, and he was able to keep the plane from, crashing. But he's trying to play with fire again this year, Cole.
Yeah, I've seen the posts on social media, people saying USF should be in the SEC instead of Florida at this point. But that's bad. That's really, really bad. And we talked about it with Kentucky, but if you actually watch that game, Florida just absolutely killed themselves with penalties. It was brutal what they were doing to themselves. And they still had every chance to win that game against South Florida, and they blew it. And I think that might be one of the craziest stock changes I've seen on one, like from week to week in college football, apart from like week one where nobody really knows who anyone is. I mean, people were ranking Florida in the top 15. They're unranked. People were saying Florida's a top 5 team in the SEC coming into the season. You got DJ Lagway. The latest 24/7 Sports media poll has them at like 15th, I think, out of 16 teams. Obviously, Kentucky was 16, but 15 out of 16 in the SEC for Florida. I mean, you went from up here to way down here. And I mean, I said it, I'm not wishing anything upon anyone. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. But I don't see how you move forward if you're Billy Napier. I don't see how Florida continue. We've got the athletic director out here posting, we're sticking with our coach in week 2 of the season. That shouldn't be happening at a school like Florida. That's not where you should be. And I thought they really turned the corner a little bit last year. I thought they kind of figured it out. They were playing some good football there. I thought maybe it might just work out there. And where I sit right now, I don't know. I'm not a Florida reporter. I don't know what they're hearing, what they're saying, what that program is like on the inside. I just don't see how this works out for Billy Napier any further. I'm not saying they're going to fire him. I'm just saying if it did happen, it wouldn't shock me. I'm not going to buy a lottery ticket because I predicted it. So I would be like, you know what? Yeah. And I liked Billy Napier. I've been following college football for a little bit now, and I liked Billy Napier at Louisiana. I thought it wasn't a bad hire when Florida grabbed him, but it just hasn't worked. And then you have this USF loss. They got Miami still on the schedule. They got Florida State still on the schedule, I believe. And a little bit ironically, their one win is Long Island, who just beat Eastern Michigan, which is a play. But regardless, it's just I don't see it. I don't see it being a very good year for the Florida Gators. I could be wrong. I might be. I wouldn't have said last year would be a very good year for the Florida Gators either, and it turned out to be pretty solid. So who knows? Maybe USF is just really like that. They play Miami too. If they somehow beat Miami, Florida, and they got the win over Boise, they got the win over Florida. If they can keep that rolling, maybe. I bet Alabama fans feel great right now. They feel so vindicated after saying for a year, no, I'm serious. USF's like that. Everyone's like, it's USF. Now they're out here 2-0 ranked. So who knows? Maybe USF's just a really, really good team, and it's not actually that bad of a loss for Florida. Maybe they're in the college football playoffs. I don't know. It's only week 2 or 3, but that was a bad one. That one was brutal to watch, and that was one of those, you see the score on your phone, you're like, that can't be right. You turn on the game, and you're like, oh, like that's what's going on right now? Like, okay.
But, when they hired him, it was a 5-year plan. He's just in year 4. So, just Gator fans don't want to hear that. But according to, the AD, he's still needing the process to be trusted. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. You hear that a lot, I feel like. And I know that there's a lot of logistical stuff you got to change with culture and players and getting it. I just feel like in the modern era of college football, with the transfer portal being what it is, with NIL being what it is, how many 5-year plans are we really going to see going forward?
Yeah.
We've seen guys, I mean, it's more so in basketball than football most of the time, but we've seen guys go in and turn a program completely around in one single season. So, maybe football takes you 2 or 3 seasons, but how many of these 5-year plans are we really going to see come to fruition as things go forward in college football? I don't know. And I don't even know if Billy Napier will get to year 5. He might, but I don't know.
Things have gotten accelerated in football now. I mean, it still can go great or blow up. I mean, Kentucky brought in 50 players this year. That could go great chemistry-wise. They're playing risks. They're, doing all this stuff in off-season. They're bonding and trying to get to know one another. And, it might go great, or there still could be times where it still goes south. But you have a chance to fix it a lot quicker now than you did, to your point. You have guys sitting out a year and all this kind of stuff. But, the 5-year plan is probably definitely, shrinking. You rookies in the NFL, you don't draft a quarterback and sit him anymore for a year or 2. I mean, like Stephen Nair with the Titans set forever. Steve Young sitting behind Joe Montana forever. If you draft a dude, you play him, he gets a year and a half or 2, and then then it's like Carson Wentz. He's on team 4 or 5, You're like, man, this dude just got drafted, and now he's a journeyman. I mean, like immediately. You know, that's the game nowadays, man.
Yeah. I mean, even in college football, you see with the transfer portal, you have being a starter doesn't even guarantee you're going to keep your guy. We saw the whole Tennessee debacle, and obviously last week we saw UNLV, Dan Mullen, UNLV getting the win over UCLA there, the pick to end it all on that game-winning drive for UCLA by Nico there. Tough seats, but there's no guarantee of anything in college anymore, and it's hard to have a 5-year plan really, because any player can leave you at any time, and you can add any player theoretically at any time. And we saw that with Kentucky. There's continuity on the roster for sure. Guys who did play behind other guys and get their turn now. We've seen that. But there's also a whole lot of guys who kind of skipped to the front of that line. They got brought in to be a starter, and we've seen that a lot, and you see that everywhere. And there's guys who left this program because they're like, well, I'm not going to wait in line. I don't want to wait my turn. I want to go somewhere I can play right now. And you're seeing that all the time. You kind of saw that on the basketball side with Travis Perry. I mean, let's not pretend that's not what this was about. He loves Kentucky, but it was pretty clear he got recruited over. He got, transfers came in that were going to play his spot. He didn't see the playing time being there. So he wanted to go somewhere where he felt like he could play a bigger role. That's going to happen in all sports every single year now. And it's harder and harder to get people to buy into these 5-year plans when, you don't even know what next year is going to look like.
Exactly. We mentioned basketball when we're talking about how it's easy to turn a roster in basketball. Of course, it's not even any players and things of that nature, but Kentucky looks to finally be on the market for a new practice facility, and it's going to be a whole thing, man. Like across from Nutter, beside Kroger Field, UK Healthcare is involved, and it's just going to be a sprawling complex there to replace the Kraft Center, that won't be in effect anymore, and get a new practice facility. And I mean, so that's some good big popping news on the basketball side.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic news. Obviously, there's certain questions that get answered now. If there's the money in the budget for this now, why was there not 2-3 years ago when John Calipari was demanding it? When we had the whole civil war between football and basketball on Kentucky's campus. But at the end of the day, regardless of why now is the time and why it wasn't the time before and how anyone's going to feel about that, I think this is a great thing for the basketball program. Chris Fisher, 247, he said something that I didn't even, I kind of felt the same thing. Reading that story, I didn't realize the Kraft Center was as old as it is. I thought it was relatively newer, and it's, by building standards, it's not that old, but like, in terms of practice facilities, the way the game's evolving, it is pretty old facility. So I think this can only mean good things for Mark Pope and the Kentucky basketball program. I think it can only mean good things as that program continues to try to, build year after year and, get back to winning national titles. And I think that I'm very excited to see. One, I'm excited to look up when I'm like 30 and finally see it finished. I'm kidding. A little construction joke there for you, but I'm excited to see it when it's finished, and very excited to see the way that can affect, Kentucky and its program going forward, because the more you're investing in these programs, generally the better they're going to be. And I always think it's good that, the trust is there, the faith is there, and right now the money is there to support the basketball program in a way that it needs to be supported.
Yeah, for sure. So it'll be similar to the Packers facility. The Hawks and the Cavs also have things like that in place. So like you said, it went from, this isn't happening to, hey, we're about to get this done and put Kentucky on the cutting edge. Yeah, like you said, the Kraft Center has been around for a minute. I think, if I'm not mistaken, even Trey Young on his visit was kind of like, their facilities aren't that great. I mean, he's came through at Oklahoma and has been with the Hawks for a while. So it's been a topic. It's been bubbling under the surface and gradually becoming more and more of a need if you want to, be Kentucky, the greatest tradition, the best at everything. Mark Pope want to be the best at everything. I want to have the toughest schedule. I want to be the best. I want to have the third toughest schedule. I want to have the best schedule. So if you're Kentucky, you want to, upgrade and get back to the top of the heap, or top 1 or 2 with the rest of the blue bloods, and this will get them back there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've just seen so much of an investment in athletics lately. Obviously, I feel like there were so many things at Kentucky that it didn't necessarily feel that way. Basketball was competitive. It's Kentucky, it's the SEC, but there were a lot of things on this campus that I'm not on right now. I don't know why I said this campus, but Kentucky's campus that were pretty outdated. I mean, we talked about it when they finally got the football exclusive indoor practice facility. They were one of 2 teams in the conference that didn't have one with Vanderbilt. That's not company you want to share. That's not company you want to share with anything in the SEC generally. No offense, but we talked about Memorial Coliseum, the largest, financial investment into women's sports in the program's history. The players can say what they want to about home court advantage. The women's basketball team did not have an air conditioner in their basketball gym. Now they do. So that's wonderful. You can say what you want about the home court advantage, but you should have an air conditioner in a building in 2024. Yeah. So, I think that it just continues to show, the way this university is investing in its athletics programs right now. They've said that they're trying to be forward thinking with the things they're doing. They're trying to support and, grow their programs in every way they can. You got the historic Memorial Coliseum renovations. You got the indoor practice facility for football. You got this new practice facility for basketball coming out, going to be state of the art. And I think it's really exciting if you're a Kentucky fan to see this much financial output being put into your athletics programs. It can only mean good things, I really think, for all of the programs that are affected by that. And, in recruiting, like you said, Trae Young was there saying, it wasn't all that great. And, obviously Calipari and Mark Pope have still been able to get some pretty good recruits out to Kentucky, but I'm sure that's going to help a little bit, along with the financial component with revenue sharing and all that. But I'm sure it's going to help a little bit to show those facilities and be like, hey, here's what we got. You can practice in a facility that is akin to those used in the NBA right now. Like it's hard to get much better than that if you're a kid, the kind of recruit who's coming into high school looking like they're going to be an NBA prospect, to say, hey, here's our practice facility. It's the same one that multiple NBA teams are using right now. Yeah. Get ready for it. I think that's going to be super, super valuable. And I think it's really reassuring to see the money being put into athletics in this way. If you're a sports fan, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And many of us are, so many people.
If you listen to this show and not a sports fan, I appreciate it, but I don't really know what you're doing.
Exactly. Because it's UK sports is 90% of it, and then the other 10 is, the other teams we root for, or just whatever's happening in the world of sports that we feel like we want to work into this episode.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, Kentucky volleyball, who arguably the most consistent team on campus for quite some time, the most successful team on campus for quite some time, going for their 9th straight SEC championship this year, won a national championship in 2020. The exposure they've gotten the past couple of days, you're playing Nebraska, I think on ABC, and you're up 2-0. Get reverse swept. You just couldn't finish them off. You get that one last set, and they just couldn't quite do it. And so Coach Skinner has never shied away from playing a tough schedule. So you finish up with them, and then you go to Penn State, who won the national championship last year. They're getting their rings and banners and all that hoopla, kind of like my Cowboys when they went to play the Eagles. Same thing. And Kentucky sweeps Penn State. Talk about putting a damper on ring night and banner night and all that. They just went up there and smacked them. So you talk about immediately learning from the previous match. Now we're up 2-0 again, top 5 opponent. And this time they put all the nails in the coffin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually wrote a piece about the volleyball team for the Cat's Paws today. You're looking at them now. They're ranked number 3 in the country by AVCA volleyball top 25. And, the reverse sweep was frustrating in Nashville against Nebraska, but, not that it's ever good to get reverse swept, not that they didn't let their foot off the gas, not that they weren't frustrated with that, but Nebraska's the unanimous number one team in the country. We're talking about a program that filled up a football stadium for a volleyball match. Like this,
Yeah.
there's levels to this, okay?
Uh-huh.
And Kentucky made them look human. They made them look vulnerable. They almost beat them. And, you just get reverse swept against the number one team in the country. It's easy to imagine the way that could spiral, the way that could demoralize you. They turn around, they sweep the defending national champions in Penn State, and they follow that up with another match in State College against New Hampshire. I know New Hampshire's no Penn State, but let's not act like New Hampshire didn't also win their conference last year and go to the NCAA tournament. This is the back-to-back NCAA tournament teams, one of which won the whole thing, and you sweep both of them. And then, I talked about that schedule, Craig Skinner. I mean, I don't know if it's insanity or if it's just, being really, really confident in your team. But you look at the schedule, Kentucky's got in non-conference play, they're about to play number 7 Pittsburgh. They got number 10 SMU, number 4 Louisville. And then once you get into the SEC, you got number 2 Texas on the road, number 8 Texas A&M on the road, number 11 Florida, number 23 Missouri on the road. And then both Tennessee and LSU receiving votes. You got the Tigers on the road. This Kentucky team looks like one of the best teams in the country, led by Brooklyn DeLay. She's fantastic, SEC Player of the Year last year. Phenomenal player. You have O'Brien being the SEC Setter of the Week last week. You got some really good players in this team, and you look like one of the best teams in the country. And then you have the schedule that you can prove it. You by the time you get to this, I mean, you got the loss to Nebraska. If Nebraska wins out, they're probably going to be the number 1 consensus seed. But depending on what Nebraska does, you have the kind of schedule that if you can march through this, you could have a case for being the number 1 overall seed when the tournament starts, or at the very least a 1 seed when this tournament starts. You're the number 3 team in the country right now. You almost beat number 1. You got a shot against number 2 later. Texas being regarded as one of the better volleyball teams in the country, 2022, 2023 national champions. I think that this volleyball team is special. I'm not gonna say this early in the season it's 2020 all over again. They're gonna win it all. They're gonna be having confetti raining on the court, but they have the talent to do it. And it's fascinating because we talked about them being one of the most consistent teams on this campus, and that's true. They've always been very consistent, but they've almost felt like they're consistently one piece away. Right? They feel like they're right there. Like they're one of the better teams in the country. A top 15 level team, but not quite in that top 3, top 5 conversation. Mm-hmm. And now they're there. Now it feels like, they've got the pieces they need. Maybe you want to see some more against Nebraska. I feel like they had to lean really, really heavily on DeLay. They didn't have a ton of attacking support from other girls there, but you sweep Penn State, you get what you need to there. Sweep New Hampshire. I think they have the pieces to be really special. And, basketball fans might hate me for this. Random smaller sport fans might hate me for this. Volleyball might have the best chance of any team on this campus winning a national title this year, and I don't think that's crazy to say.
It shouldn't be. If you pay attention, some sports fans are just team specific. I'm Kentucky football, I'm Kentucky basketball, and then you got more that all encompassing fans that Kentucky across the board. If it's Kentucky, I'm rooting for it. You may not go to the Bell Complex, but you keep up with the soccer team, tennis making a deep run. But if you look at what volleyball has done, like you said, this year, being top tier clearly, they just went and proved it this past weekend. But even in a, quote, down year, you look at last year, they still won the SEC, played an insane schedule pre-conference, and was taking lumps. I mean, last year they were taking L's, and I don't know if they were 5-6 or 4-6, but I was looking, I was like, I don't know about them this year. And they still, kind of licked all their wounds, regrouped, and won the SEC for the 8th consecutive year. And that's a, quote, average, that's just what I do year for Craig Skinner. And now he's reloaded, and like you said, upper echelon, top 3, 4, wherever you want to put them team this year, that's probably dying for another shot at Nebraska should they meet them down the road, because they're clearly not scared of them. They're good enough to go up 2-0 on them in a neutral court. So, I mean, you got to go up 2-0 to get reverse swept in the first place, and they did that, man.
I mean, I think if you're Kentucky, your dream scenario here is to be as good as you can, get opposite sides of the bracket for Nebraska, and meet them again in the title game. Because, if you're Kentucky, you got that extra motivation. Not that you need extra motivation in a national championship game and it's Nebraska, but you let your foot off the gas the first time. You can make sure you don't do that the second time. You know how to get at this team. You know what you need to do to get at this team. You know, it could be falling just the right way for Kentucky this year. And, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of other, I haven't done all of my research yet. I do value every athletics team that Kentucky sponsors. I don't know, maybe Stunt's got a shot this year. I know that Cal Baptist is a hard one to beat in the stunt national title. But I think that when you look at all the sports Kentucky has, you know, rifle is always really good. Harry Mullins has a good program there. You know, I'm not sure how the golfs are looking right now, but across the board, there's some very strong athletic teams at this university. There's some strong teams that do a lot, and there's a lot of teams that bring so much to so many fans. I don't think any program is lesser than the other, but when you look at who has the best shot to win it all this year, I feel like Craig Skinner and the volleyball team has a really good case to be that one.
Yeah, and that is not crazy talk at all. I mean, it is. He is proven. I mean, look at his track record. Already has one. Already won a chip. You know, and was knocking on the door for several years. It wasn't like he came out of nowhere and just caught lightning in a bottle. You know, like North Carolina State made it to the Final Four in basketball, and you know they was ready to fire the coach. You know, before that run, Kevin was ready to get him out of there, and then he goes to the Final Four.
1 year later.
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't that at all. You know, they've been knocking on the door, making it to the tournament. You know, going back. You know, Brooklyn DeLay, all the great players, Leah Edmond, and all the players that kind of paved the way, that were a part of what they were able to do in 2020. You know, even though they weren't on the court for the confetti, they, you know, sacrificed and, you know, helped the program get to that point. So his track record speaks for itself. 2 decades, you know, at Kentucky, for what he's built is just, you know, just phenomenal, man, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned your volleyball piece for the Cats Paws. What else you got? Because it is the busy time. It's about to be even busier. Football and basketball, you're about to have to do double duty. Baseball schedule just came out today, the SEC portion of the schedule. So what all can people look for and read and consume when they click the Cole Park Cats Paws author link?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing a lot of stuff with football lately. Obviously, with the season going on right now, you've got a lot of stuff with the quarterback situation, the Zach Calzada, Cutter Boley situation. I've done a couple stories on that. I do weekly updates on everything to do with that program. You know, I'm at all the press conferences. Stoops' Monday one, the Tuesday offense, defense on Wednesday. You name it, I'm there. I also had a story I put out this afternoon. You know, I listened in on the Eastern Michigan football press conference from Monday, saw what their coach and players had to say, wrote a piece about what they had to say. You know, we obviously cover basketball. We had some updates on Jaden Quainton's situation this morning from John Rothstein over at CBS. We'll obviously be getting into more of that as basketball season continues to draw closer. You know, we'll be talking to some players, doing some of that. We got the yearbook. We're still getting that finalized, getting that ready to go. Got another print edition of the Cats Paws coming out soon. I've got a column in there and a couple stories in there you should look for when that hits the shelves. I put out a story right before I went live here, once again, about the quarterbacks, but I'll have another one I'll be writing about a few different things. The wide receivers. We talked with Coach Washington, the wide receivers coach, today. We talked with Kendrick Law. We talked with Willie Rodriguez, the tight end. Talked with Cutter Boley. Talked with Bush Hamdan tomorrow. We'll have the defense, Brad White, and players. So just all kinds of football stuff, all kinds of, you know, once it gets closer, all kinds of basketball stuff. I'm doing some volleyball stuff here and there whenever necessary. I'll be doing some baseball stuff in the spring. You know, whatever needs covered on this campus, I'll be covering it. So I said on this campus again, still not on campus, but so used to being a student there that I'm used to saying that. But yeah, you know, just any and all Kentucky coverage. And if there's something that somebody wants covered, we've got our message board. I'm always open to people, you know, giving me feedback, saying like, hey, what about this? Can I get some on this? And I'll do my best to make it happen. So, you know, just keeping busy, staying very busy, and any and all Kentucky coverage, I'll be doing my best to take care of all that.
You ain't got a lie, Cole. You're standing right outside the K Club as we speak. Just go ahead and tell
Yeah,
everybody.
actually, Mark Pope is just off camera. You know, he's getting ready for a dinner here, but no, I'm in
You
my.
heard about your gourmet meals, didn't he? You gotta come.
Hey, you know, he did. Maybe he did.
I mean,
Probably
he was
not.
in He was in Argentina. Who knows what he ate down there? But yeah, you making Peruvian stuff, and you might have a little South American fare for him, man.
He made me some French onion beef stew the other day. It was quite good. So
We need to have a little Cole's Cook segment or something. Just make it part of every episode, man. But look, and y'all follow Cole Park, COLEPARKE_WSC on Twitter. Every now and then he'll share what he is cooking. In addition to all the Cat's Paws content, definitely appreciate you taking time out of all of that busy hecticness to hop on here and share insights with our viewers and our listeners. And we appreciate the viewers and listeners for viewing and listening. Feel free to subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, Believe in Kentucky, BLEAVIN Kentucky. Click on that link tree. You can like and subscribe everything. TikTok's on there, Twitter, and all the social media, the podcast app, Apple Podcast, Spotify, all that stuff where you can listen, subscribe, give us the little 5-star rating. And if you feel like you want to take a second to write a review about what you think, hey, like the show, enjoy the show, whatever you want to put, we'd appreciate all of that. And as always, appreciate you taking time to check out the show. It's been another episode of Believe in Kentucky. Former guy Cole Park. My name is Vinny Hardy, and we'll see everybody next time. Go Cats, beat Eastern Michigan, and we'll see y'all next week.